So we'll get started in just a couple minutes here at 8:30. Okay, good evening. Welcome to SJAA Astroimaging Workshop. I'm Glenn Newell, and I head the hands-on imaging program for SJAA, one of two imaging programs that we have, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. First of all, get situated with a couple things here. For optimal viewing of this, let me ditch the camera for a second here. We recommend two things. One, if you can use the dark theme in YouTube, that'll help you. There won't be such bright contrast to shine against slides and other things that I'm showing, so that'll help. And then also, I guess there's one word here that's not highlighted. We recommend that you use at least 720p. That's what I'm streaming at, and we'll see if that's good enough for small fonts in Astroimaging programs or not. And maybe next time I'll try 1080p and see if I have enough bandwidth and all compute power to stream at in HD. Okay. Also in the YouTube, there's a chat window on the right-hand side. And if you have questions, you can type them in there, and I will hopefully see them and respond at some point. Okay, let me go back here for a second. So normally I have these events in person at Little Uvis Open Space Preserve in Morgan Hill. And I do that 2 times in a quarter. And then the third month in the quarter is a private event for club members, SJAA members, where we actually, rather than me give a lecture and demonstrate things, we'll have them actually be hands-on either with their equipment or with club equipment, and I'll just be there to help and give tips. And there'll be other club members there that are doing their own imaging, but they're always nice and willing to help out. Excuse me. And so it's a good time. But that's a members only event, and we'll talk about membership in a minute. Let's see, what else? So yeah, so normally these workshops that I do out at Little Uvis, we arrive at sunset. I give a lecture until it's dark enough to see Polaris. It's usually about an hour. And then we go on to demonstrate some deep space or other types of nighttime photography. Um, so since we can't do that, I'm going to do similar. I'm going to talk for about an hour, and then if the weather holds, we'll do some do some demonstration of live imaging after the talk. And for this month, what I wanted to talk about was, I started posting videos on my YouTube channel about a year after I started in the hobby. So I started in 2014. So in 2015, I started posting videos about how to do astroimaging, and it's been a while since I've posted new ones, and I wanted to kind of cover things that have changed in the interim. So tonight's lecture is all about, hey, if you watched my videos from 2015, what would you be missing, or what would you need to know that's different, or things that I've learned in the meantime. So that's what tonight's lecture is about, and we can go ahead and dive in here, I guess. But first, there will be a brief talk about SJAA. Let me hide my window again here, or switch it to this side. Whoops, that one, not that one. Okay, and I've still got that one up. This one. All right. So now you can see the QR code. So I have tried to put in this. Let me just fix one small thing here. I don't know why this guy's on. Okay. Everywhere that I have links in this presentation, I've tried to put QR codes. So you should be able to hold your smartphone up to the screen there, and that'll be easier than scribbling down, trying to write down all the letters in a URL or whatever. So San Jose Astronomical Association, we have two main websites that we use to communicate with people. So our own website is sjaa.net, and then all of our public events are posted on Meetup, and you all probably RSVP'd there, so you know about that. But anyway, there's 1,500 members at meetup.com/SJ-Astronomy. Okay, so those are what the two websites look like, and on the club website, there's some things like the listings of the programs that we have, and some observing sites, and so you might want to just go through the tabs here when you get a chance on that site. So with this whole COVID thing, we're trying to do more and more online stuff. Let me turn off this guy here again. So as we get online, we've got stuff kind of spread around. So we're working on getting just one one YouTube channel for SJAA. So at the moment there's these four, but we're consolidating down to one. So anything that's uh, purely SJAA, I'll copy from my channel to the SJAA channel and vice versa. And then these other channels will all consolidate under this SJ-Astronomy at some point in the next month or so. Okay, so those are the YouTube channels. So SJAA is a nonprofit based in San Jose, and we do a whole bunch of stuff. We like to say we're a hyperactive club. Normally, we have a number of at least 3 star parties each month, if not more. 2 we call in-town star parties at Hoagie Park in San Jose, Los Altos or Los Gatos border. Um, and then there's another one at Rancho Canada de Oro, which is near where I do my events down in Morgan Hill. And we have programs for people that are just starting out in the observing side of the hobby. We call it Quick Start. We have a telescope loaner program, so you can find out if you're really interested or not and what type of equipment interests you before you go out and spend money, which is always a good thing. And then we do school star parties. Once a month after our board meeting, we have speakers come in from NASA and SETI and other places and give a lecture. We have an Intro to the Night Sky class. We have a library with books and magazines on stuff. We have 2 astrophotography programs. One is the Imaging Special Interest Group, and that's either a lecture specific on astrophotography or a group discussion and people sharing their astro images and that type of thing. And then I do the hands-on stuff, as I mentioned earlier, workshops and the club private field clinics out at Little Uvis Open Space Preserve. Okay, we have a couple swap meets a year, which is really great place to sell and buy gear. And then I mentioned the Rancho Canada de Oro, and we also have once a month we have solar observing at Hoagie Park. That's another thing that we're doing online now. And then we have a telescope fix-it sessions on that same Sunday as the solar observing. So if you've got something wrong with your telescope or you just need some help, you can sign up to get help during that time. And then for the club members, we have club private viewing. We have a few dark sites that we have permission to go in and privately have club private imaging there. Okay, so let's get into tonight's topic. And again, if you come up with a question or something, you can just type it in the YouTube chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and answer it at the appropriate time. So tonight's topic again, you can see here on the upper right-hand corner, this is what my rig looked like in the early part of 2015. It's a DSLR on an 8-inch RC with the Orion Sirius mount and, laptop and a bunch of cables and whatnot. And then jumping fast forward to today, this is the rig today. So, what all have I learned along the way, and what has changed, and what do I need to share with you? So we'll talk about the importance of the mount. Try to hit that in every lecture, especially before you go out and spend any money. We need to talk about the mount. Talk about what's changed in polar alignment, auto guiding. In 2015, we were using manual focusers and batten off masks, and we'll talk about, the next steps in that. In 2015, we had DSLRs, and CCDs were out of the budget, at least for me. So we had modified DSLRs for astro imaging, but now we have dedicated and cooled CMOS astro cameras. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about all the gear that I've blown up along the way trying to use long USB cables and some tips on if you're going to do that, how to maybe avoid that. But there's both mechanical and electrical problems that can occur that can damage gear. So I want to make you aware of that. And then imaging software, image acquisition software. We'll talk about planning software briefly mentioned, and we'll talk about what my rig is here that we're going to be using tonight, and then we'll do the demo. So that's the plan. And speaking of which, let's see if the weather has been updated. So it looks like we're still good in the early part of the evening here. This is, there's lots of astronomical observing weather sites. This is one that I use, clear outside. And besides their view here, we're also checking for humidity. That's going to be the problem, is if we get fog rolling in here, but hopefully it won't happen until after we're done. Okay. All right, so first topic, it's still all about the mount. The mount is the most important part of an astroimaging rig, not the camera, not the telescope. The mount is the most important thing. So keep that in mind. And the reason for that is because you're trying to track things that are very small and very far away. Small in terms of the angle on the sky. Let me turn my webcam back on here. And why I keep getting that frame back. Okay. So briefly, angles on the sky. Stars wiggle around because of the atmosphere. That's what we say they twinkle, but it's really the atmosphere moving around. And typically for amateur astronomy, meaning the sites that you have that haven't been picked by professional astronomers, that have laminar flow off the up the mountain over the observatory site, you're going to have at best like a 2 arcsecond scene. So what's an arcsecond? So 360 degrees in a circle, 60 arc minutes in a degree, 60 arc seconds in an arc minute. So an arc second is pretty small. In fact, if you took a golf ball and you held it up, okay, you know how big a golf ball is. If you move that now, 5.6 miles away, 9 kilometers away, that's how big an arc second is on the sky. And because the best scene that you're going to probably get is around the order of 2 arc seconds, we want to sample our stars at 1 arc second. So Nyquist theorem, sampling theorem, right? So we're trying to be like 1 arc second accurate, with mass market mounts, right? So that's the challenge, and that's why the mount really makes the difference. That's why you need arc second accuracy. So you should plan on spending 75% of your budget on the mount, and that'll keep you from buying multiple mounts. You might like I did, like a lot of people do, you don't know what you're doing. You get a catalog or something. I literally got a catalog of things, a paper catalog, and picked a telescope, and it came with a mount. And of course, that lasted, about 3 weeks or something. And then I realized I needed a better mount. So we want to avoid that. So there's lots of brands of mounts. We happen to be near where Orion is in Watsonville, California, and we're fortunate to have a store. A lot of places don't have telescope stores. We have one Orion store in Cupertino. So the minimum mount that I would recommend for astrophotography is the Orion Atlas Pro. Now there's that's in a certain sense an OEM, right? So it comes in other brands, Skywatcher, etc. But that set of features is like the minimum, and it's really going to make a huge difference in your enjoyment of the hobby, right? Because if you're fighting oblong stars and wiggly stars, then you're just not going to have a good time, and it's just so much smoother when you're not fighting with your mount. It really makes a big difference. So again, yeah, the Atlas Pro or Skywatcher equivalent. You can do the research if you want to iopteron or whatever and get the equivalent mount. But some of the thinking behind this one is, it's belt drive. It's the least expensive mount I think with that comes with belt drive versus trying to upgrade ones with gears. And it's pretty heavy duty, and it can be, all these mass-produced mounts are only going to be so good, right? But you can, if you're mechanically inclined, or if you want to pay somebody to quote hypertune, there's literally a place you can send your mount and have it hypertuned, and Deep Space Products is that place, or he sells a DVD that tells you how to do it. You can improve that even further, and you get a lot of bang for the buck out of doing that upgrade. Other than that, it has a lot of upgrades from the next model down, which is the Atlas, and it's not that much heavier than the model below that one, which is the Sirius. Yes, it's a lot heavier if you're going to be lugging it up a trail or something, but just in terms of moving it from a car to where you're observing, it's not that much heavier. Okay. One thing I've learned in all the different mounts that I've played with is some of them come with a leg pointing outward to the north, and some of them put that leg pointing backwards to the south. And it actually makes a difference. And for me, I'm not sure why they have it to the south. I think maybe it's uh, they think there's better clearance if you have a really long refractor or something. But what can happen is if you have a leg on the south side, when you're setting the mount up, you need to put the counterweights on before you put the scope on. And I may say OTA when I'm referring to a telescope. It means uh, optical tube assembly, I believe. When you want to put the weights on first, because if you put your scope on without the counterweights and your clutches aren't tight, the whole thing can flip over. Um, so that's bad. So you got to put the counterweights on first. But if you've got no leg out in front, you've got these counterweights hanging out over nothing before you put the scope on. It's unbalanced, right, and could tip over. So that's why I like to have a leg to the on the north side, and all the mounts that I've seen anyway, uh, consumer level mounts anyway, you can move this bolt. I've got my mouse on the wrong screen here. You can move this bolt, which controls how the head aligns with the tripod, and that way you can change the orientation of the leg. So I recommend doing that if yours comes with the leg pointing south. Okay. Another thing I've learned that's kind of interesting, a little bit of math. So where if you've got multiple counterweights, or you've got counterweights of different sizes, how do you put them on there to balance things? So just without any deep thought, I used to think that, well, it's better to have uh, a counterweight, farther out, and that way you can use a smaller counterweight, and you'd have less total weight on the right ascension bearings of the mount. And that sort of makes sense, but it turns out to be totally wrong, because there's this thing called angular momentum. And angular momentum goes with the square of the distance, not just the linear distance. So that's why that's a misconception. So this comes from plane wave or astrophysics. Sorry, astrophysics puts this out, and they're telling you, what you want to do is you want to have all your weight up close to the scope, and then you have a smaller counterweight that you can slide back and forth to kind of balance things out. And I actually, they explain the math here, but I actually did it on a spreadsheet and tried a few different things, and it's right. It's always less total momentum that your mount has to overcome if you keep your counterweights up close to the mount, even if you have more of them because they're closer to the mount. It's better. You get better tracking, better auto guiding with that situation. So that's an interesting thing. And then, sometimes you see pictures of people's setups, or you see at remote observatories or something setups, and you'll see that some people have the counterweights all down at the end, and some people have them up by the mount. So some people know about this, and some people don't. So anyway, that's what we need to do. Okay, and then here's another topic: is periodic error correction. Some mounts offer periodic error correction, and in this case, the mount driver that we use with those Orion, Cinta, Skywatcher mounts is EQMOD. It's free software, and it also supports the recording and playing back of periodic error correction. So this helps figure out, some of the inaccuracies in your mount due to gears or grease or whatever it is. And you can, while you're auto guiding, you can record this and then play it back, and it'll make the next time, and it'll make your auto guider not have to work so hard, and you'll have a smoother result. So I'm not going to go into the gory details here, but yeah, basically you just auto guide on a star, and you record 5 to 7 cycles of your worm gear, and this dialog here will help you set that up. And then you save that file, and it'll just play it back. And in EQMOD, right down here, when it tells you what tracking rate it's at, it'll say sidereal plus PEC instead of just sidereal when you've got the periodic error correction going there. It can also be stored in the mount controller in some mounts. I had always assumed it was part of the handset, and it may be in perhaps in some mounts, but in the Cinta, Orion, Skywatcher, at least these models or their equivalents, you can store it in the mount itself without the handset, and we tend to try to avoid using the handset when we're astro imaging. It's just one more piece of gear that we don't need to have involved. And in the newer versions of EQMOD, there is a way to enable storing it in the mount itself. Okay. So let's move on to polar alignment techniques. So what's changed since I recorded videos in 2015? Well, the whiz bang easiest way to do it is to use the QHY Pole Master. Now this does mean you're buying yet another camera to put on your mount, so you would essentially have 3 cameras probably, right? A guiding camera, an imaging camera, and now this thing. But it really does make it quick and easy. And if you were trying to use a polar scope before, you don't have to get down on your knees. And I was always fumbling with my glasses and hurting my knees and all this stuff to look through those polar scopes. So this is a really nice way to go. And there's, you can find lots of videos on YouTube about how to use these, but they really make it simple. You just follow the on-screen instructions. So there's that. If you don't want to buy another camera, you could spend less money on a SharpCap Pro license, and that lets you use your guide camera, but you need to have a guide scope that's 200 millimeters or less in focal length for that to be effective. So if you've got a short tube 80, that's like 400 millimeters. That's too long. But some of the smaller guide scopes you'd be okay. And of course, you can't use an off-axis guider or an on-axis guider because your focal length is way longer at that point than 200 millimeters. But that's an option as well for easy polar alignment. And of course, SharpCap does a lot more than just polar alignment. It's a complete image acquisition software package, although I think it's geared more towards planetary than deep space, but they keep adding features. So you can explore that, but it's really good for planetary. All right, auto guiding. What's changed in auto guiding? Well, PhD2 keeps getting better, and it is still pretty much the most popular auto guiding software, and it's free, so you can't complain about that. I think the best thing you could do, though, to learn about how to use it is to read this best practices document that they have. And so here's the link, and you should go through that, and it tells you, where in the sky should you do your calibration, and lots of other tips that you might have not been aware of. So that's a good thing. And then, what I've learned along the way, kind of in the journey of improving your auto guiding, a lot of people start with a little rig like this, maybe a 50 millimeter guide scope in diameter. And, this is a popular Orion Starshoot auto guider camera. And unfortunately, you might have even started with this cable that they give you to go from the camera to the mount, which is not what you want to do. You want to use ASCOM pulse guiding, which uses the USB. And the advantage of that is that way the mount, or I'm sorry, that way PhD2 knows where in the sky the mount is pointing, and it can be more effective at doing its job because it's integrated with ASCOM versus using this relay cable here, the ST4 cable. Okay. Other things that you can do, is get a bigger guide scope that's closer to the focal length of your whatever your telescope is. There's a 60 millimeter diameter, 200 millimeter focal length from Orion that's popular, and again that would work with SharpCap for polar alignment, and then a really popular guide scope is Orion Short Tube 80, which they stopped making for a while. Now they have it back, I think, and Iopteron and other people have similar. I think it's 480 80 millimeter focal length for memory and 80 millimeter diameter. And too long a focal length to do the polar alignment, but it's a lot of aperture and a lot of focal length for a guide scope. And then with that, people generally go to a smaller pixel size, more pixels, smaller pixels camera with that. Uh, One thing I'm remembering to tell you, if you go and buy a short tube 80 by itself, uh, it's not going to have a piece that you need. See how long this extension is here out to the camera? It doesn't come with that extension. So to come to focus with the camera, you need to buy a little piece of extension as well. Um, excuse me. Another thing is that oftentimes you'll see guide scopes with these 3 adjustment screws on the scope rings, and that kind of seems like a good idea maybe to get your uh, scope lined up with your main scope, which is actually not that important if you're imaging. But what it can cause is differential flexure. It's not a super strong mechanical arrangement if one of those screws is not tight. So if you can, you want to get scope rings that fit exactly your guide scope and not use those adjustable ones. So that'll help. And I mentioned, better guide camera, Orion Starshoot Auto Guider Pro, QHY 5L2. Those are actually the same camera, just different firmware. Then CWO, they have a couple different mini uh, cameras that are 1.25 inch form factor. ASI 1290 would be a good one. And then if you super serious, there's ASI 174, which has bigger pixels and pretty big chip depending on. I talk about it down here in the off-axis. Depending on the size of your prism, because it doesn't make sense to get a camera sensor that's bigger than your prism in this little guy here in your off-axis guider if you're going to go off-axis. Yeah, so that's the next another step or another approach to guiding is to use an off-axis guider rather than a separate guide scope, and then you don't have to worry about differential flexure at all. But there are some challenges. You have to arrange this thing so that your guide camera up here and your imaging camera off the back, come to focus at the same point because they're both sitting after focus, right? So they have to be par focal. And then another thing you need to be aware of now, if you go and rotate your camera to get a different orientation, with a separate guide scope, it doesn't matter if you rotate your imaging camera because it doesn't affect your guiding because you're guiding with a different telescope and camera. In this case, if you rotate your imaging camera, and that may cause you to rotate your off-axis guider, in which case you've changed the orientation of the guide camera against the sky, and you have to calibrate your PhD2 if you do that. If, however, you have a mechanical or electric or however you want to say it, a rotator that's got an ASCOM driver, then PhD2 will keep track of that and you don't have to recalibrate. So that's one of the things, one of the projects I did in this last year was build a rotator. Okay, and then another challenge is, so you've got this little prism or what have you, so you may have trouble finding guide stars. So that's a challenge with off-axis guiders. Okay, we talked about the ASI 174. There is this other breed of off-axis, or they call it on-axis guiding, which is kind of a whole topic in itself. And that works. You can see there's a mirror in here, but it's what's called a cold mirror, because the colder light, the visible light, bounces off the mirror and comes out this top piece, but the infrared light goes right through that mirror, and you put your guide camera on the back, so it's guiding in the infrared, which has some advantages. You can guide lower to the horizon and less turbulence and stuff with infrared. Uh, and also, there's a optical aberration that happens because your infrared light is coming through this mirror at a 45-degree angle. It has astigmatism. But it turns out if you know what you're doing, then you can use that astigmatism to figure out if you're in focus or not and which way you're out of focus. So part of the whole purpose of this ONAG thing is that with some more software, you can watch the shape of the guide star and use that to keep everything in focus in real time constantly. And that's what I'm doing on my rig, and we'll show that a little later on. But this is not the type of thing that you just, wake up on a Sunday or a cloudy night or whatever and pull the trigger. This takes a lot of planning. There's a lot of, especially if you're going to use a focal reducer. And that's why I say this is a whole lecture in itself. So don't you really have to plan this carefully and check for all the clearances of all the gear around this thing and back focus and all types of stuff. So, but those are ways to improve your auto guiding. Okay. Then so focusing. So if we go back to that 2015 rig, it was totally manual focusing. Probably looks something like this here without the motor. And so at the beginning of the night, you'd go to a bright star and put a batten off mask on and manually focus. And then, maybe every few hours or something, if there's temperature change or whatever, you would recheck your focus. But that means that, once you go to bed, you can't leave the thing running, and if the temperature is going to change or its filters are going to change and the focus needs to change, you're not going to be there to do it. So that means you need to stay up or not change the focus. So the next step in the hobby, is to then add some motorized control to your focuser. And then once you have that with software, then we can do things like autofocus and check the focus periodically and correct it if it's goes out because of temperature or because of a filter change or whatever it is. So, there may be some add-on kit, like this is an add-on kit for the focuser that came with the RC telescopes that I've used. And that's from this uh, jump down here, Rigelsys company, and I've got the QR codes on the next slide. And there's other brands as well. And then you could also, build your own with a stepper motor and some belts and pulleys and gears or what have you. If you want to do that, I determined that the least expensive then electronics that you can buy ready to go with an ASCOM controller is out of the Ukraine, and that's this Focus Stream Pro here. Of course, you can also build that part yourself as well. You could use an Arduino, and then there's some code out on the net to make a ASCOM driver for that. And I've said ASCOM a whole bunch of times, but I might not have explained what ASCOM is. Just a software standard, was only for Windows, and now it's starting to branch out a little bit using remote. You can have ASCOM still on Windows somewhere, but you can have the actual devices on Linux or a Raspberry Pi or something remotely and still use those. Um, so that's what that ASCOM thing is all about. There's another standard called Indy, which is getting real popular, which is free and open source, and that's also cross-platform. Um, so that's what the ASCOM was. Let's see. Um, you can also, a lot of us made some kind of autofocuser for camera lenses with a belt or some other friction device that would turn the body of the lens with a motor. But now there's a company that makes a device that sits between your camera and a camera lens, uh, and it will use the motor in the lens, just like you autofocus with your lens on a DSLR. Now you can autofocus with that lens on an Astro camera. So that's nice, and they have them for Canon and Nikon lenses or lens mounts, right? Okay, and then of course, you can just buy a whole professional grade focuser with, you know, built-in motor and all of that. So Moonlight is a popular company for that. I noticed as I was talking here that I skipped past this first bullet. So going all the way back up to when we were using batten-off masks, one of the things I've learned in the meantime is if you are using a camera lens, uh, that the batten-off mask, I had tried to print some on a transparency and tried to buy some that were made out of the normal batten-off thick black material. Um, just noticed my webcam has frozen here. Let me take care of that while we chat. Um, so in the meantime, uh, I found. Just gonna start this back up here. Okay. Uh, in the meantime, I found that there's a laser etched batten-off mask that really works well, and because none of those other solutions that I was describing worked well for camera lenses, because the plastic was just too thick for the lines on the batten-off mask were just too thick to be effective, and you really needed a really fine-grained for the smaller diameters of a camera lens. So anyway, this Sharp Star Lonely Spec is the way to go there. Okay. All right, so I promised there'd be QR codes for that slide. So again, here's the Lonely Spec URL with the QR code and Rigel Sys and the Focus Stream Pro. You can Google for if you want to build Arduino, you can Google for that. And here's the Astromechanics is the people that make the camera lens focuser. And then Moonlight, is one popular focuser company if you want to buy everything professional grade focuser with the motor and all of that. So what can you do once you've got that, controlled with a motor? So now you can autofocus. So we're showing here, in Sequence Generator Pro is one popular imaging program. These days there are quite a few to choose from, and at some point they're all going to do what's called a V curve. It's a way to autofocus. So what's happening here is it's going to, move your focuser out to a certain point, and then take a picture and figure out how big that star is, and then give you a relative number that is the quality of the focus, and then it'll move the focuser in a little bit and it'll keep going. And ideally, you'd want to have this V curve, right? So you're out of focus on the outside, and then you move through focus and back out the other side, and then they can do some math here and predict exactly where the center of your focus is. So that's called a V curve. And I guess we could get into in a deeper lecture. We could get into, well, what if you don't have a V? What if you have a J? And what if you have jaggies and all that stuff? But this is what, when things are working good, this is what a good V curve looks like. So now that you can autofocus, right? So you could set it up. You could do it, every hour or every half an hour. Most of these focusers come with a temperature, or I guess you could go buy a temperature device that can be read by software. But you could say, well, you could figure out, well, I know I need to move my focuser this much every 5 degrees or every 1 degree. Or you could just say, well, do an autofocus every time the temperature changes by a whole degree or something. Or maybe your filters require different focus for different filters. So when the filter changes, you could do an autofocus. Depending on the type of scope you have and how solid your rig is, after you do a meridian flip, you might want to check your focus, etc. And then, of course, we talked about the ONAG has this real-time continuous focus capability. So that's another. In that case, you don't even have to mess with the V curves and all of that. Okay. So I mentioned at the top, one of the big changes since 2015 is the availability of cooled CMOS astro cameras. So again, at the time, your choices were, an astro modified DSLR or a CCD camera. CCD cameras are real expensive. DSLRs less so, but they're not optimized for astronomy. They're not cooled out of the box anyway. And so you had to, and they weren't even, they had to be modified for astronomy to get more of the H alpha, get more of the infrared light. So you had to modify your DSLR. And so those were the choices. But since then, there's now, gosh, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 camera manufacturers that are offering essentially the same sensors that are in either DSLRs or security cameras, CMOS, but they're dedicated for astronomy, and the firmware has been changed for astronomy, and they're cooled, and that makes a huge difference in the amount of noise that you get in your photos. So that's really been a game changer without having to go all the way to the cost of a CCD. And there's a longer story about the manufacturers are stopped making CCDs, so CMOS is really the future anyway. So there you have it, I guess. So let's see. Did I already talk about all of this? So yeah, CMOS astro camera is less expensive than CCD. They're available in mono or color, and the mono is important if you want to do, the Hubble palette, if you want to take pictures of nebula with narrowband filters, which is my passion, right? You really need a mono camera, and with the DSLR, they were only available in color unless you literally took the thing apart and scraped off this Bayer matrix, which is the thing that's on top of the sensors. Are really all monochrome, but they put little a matrix of red, green, and blue filters in front of the pixels on the sensor and make it into a color sensor that way. And I actually did have a DSLR that was where somebody had, I'd be too afraid to do it, but somebody had modified it by scraping off this bare matrix to make it monochrome. But now you can buy monochrome CMOS cameras. Um, as I said, they're cooled. People, I had a whole complicated ice water cooling thing for my DSLRs. Other people use the thermoelectric coolers. Um, and you have to, how do you get the cold into the camera, and how do you keep it from doing over when it's cold and all that stuff. So it was a whole process. But now you can buy something already ready to go, so that's good. And I said the firmware is different too, so they're set up specifically for some of this astro stuff that we want to do in terms of doing a region of interest with faster frame rate for planetary and gain and offset and whatnot for deep space. Um, and an interesting thing is, some of these are available with smaller sensors than a DSLR, and it turns out that that actually has some advantages in terms of cost. And um, so, like a really popular camera is this ASI 1600. So it's a 3/4 inch sensor from memory here. I hope I got that right. So it's smaller than a crop sensor in a DSLR. So what that means is, there's a couple of things that really drive cost of a narrowband imaging rig. So one is the cost of the filters. So if you've got a an ASI 1600 and as skinny as their filter wheels are, you can use 1.25" filters. So those are much less expensive than a 2-inch filter, which you would need for a crop sensor, or a 50 mm filter you would need for a full frame sensor. Um, so there's that. So and it's quite a bit of money really to go to those larger filter sizes. So there's that. Having a larger sensor means that you need a flatter image circle in your scope, right? So a lot of scopes are flat in the center, but then out towards the edges, they have issues. So you need, correctors of various types, field flattener. But if you've got a small sensor, then you're probably in the sweet spot anyway, so you may not have to worry about that. And then also, if you got a bigger sensor, bigger image circle, then you need a bigger focuser, and things get big and heavy and more expensive. So it really is a cost advantage. Of course, you have to think about your field of view and all that stuff, but um, it it really is a cost advantage when you come to narrowband imaging with these smaller sensors. Okay, so another topic I mentioned at the top, uh, I for many years was doing a lot of stuff with long USB cables. I mean, we're talking like 25 feet or 50 feet. And the idea was that, you could set up your rig out in the yard and then go in the house and sit in the armchair and run your rig from in the house. And while I figured out ways to make that work, there's active cables and there's some gotchas. And then even with, if you've ironed out the gotchas, there's some problems. So I want to share that pain with you. And now we have some options that are less expensive than they would have been at the time. So today, I would say it's much preferable to have a small computer out actually on the telescope or on the mount or at the base of the mount or what have you, and just talk to that via Wi-Fi or what have you. Um, so it might be like a Raspberry Pi, or there's, Raspberry Pis that are built into appliances or other appliance computers that are available, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, so that's a better way to go. USB was never designed to be outside. It was never designed to have long runs on it, and it certainly wasn't designed to have, uh, I guess you could argue that you might have a bunch of peripherals with different power supplies, but they're all right next to each other, right? And in the house. Uh, but when you start doing telescope stuff and you've got your laptop on the end of a 50-foot cable, and then you plug your laptop into an AC outlet in the house, is 50 feet away from where your scope is plugged in, you could have a huge problem. So I've got a slide here in a minute that will tell you, how to make the best of that situation. But there's basically I've damaged a lot of gear over the years, and the least thing that happens is you blow up your active USB cable. Um, but worse than that, you blow up a port on your laptop or blow up a port on your camera. Uh, that's not good. And then, and trust me, I've learned this the hard way. And not only that, but then there's the mechanical risk, right? So you've got this 50-foot cable hanging off your laptop. And if you trip over that thing, you could pull your laptop off the table onto the floor. You could mechanically break your laptop USB port. And again, I've got some tips around that. But I had one laptop and fortunately, it was maintained by my place of employment. But I think I went through 5 motherboards on one laptop, and it was probably due to my astronomy outings. So don't tell them, but anyway, that's what happened. Um, let's see here. So yeah, laptop USB ports, you could get the mechanical damage from tripping over the cable, electrical damage from ground voltage differences, which could require a motherboard replacement. Same thing with, cameras on the other end or gear on the other end can get damaged as well. One thing that I did a lot of research on USB cables and extenders and different things, and there's some that use Ethernet cable to connect, a transmitter and a receiver of USB, and Ethernet is designed with little not ball-ins, but little transformers that isolate the different pieces of equipment from ground potentials. But even though these USB extenders, every one I've looked at, even though they use the physical cable for Ethernet, they're not actually using those transformers, and so they don't actually isolate the ground. You can take an ohmmeter and tell that they're connected to the same ground. So they actually have the same problem with grounding that these active cables have. So be aware of that. But if you're going to do this, and this is good to know just for USB around your telescope in general, if you're going to have a bunch of different power supplies, whether they be, different batteries for a camera, different voltage for a DSLR or something, and 12 volts for the mount and dew heaters and other stuff, you need to be careful with how things are grounded. So basically, you want a common ground for everything, right? And so take these power supplies and take a voltmeter and first check to see if there's, volts already there, in which case you probably want to get a different power supply. But if there's, only a few millivolts or less than a millivolt or something, then it's safe to connect the grounds together, and that'll give you a common ground system and help solve some of these electrical problems that we talked about. You know, uh, um, and then you can connect all that supply grounds together to the ground lead on your AC or your mains, or to the negative terminal of your 12-volt battery if you're on battery. just to illustrate this again, learn this lesson the hard way, right? So I have long USB cable out at the mount with the laptop, getting everything ready, everything's connected, everything's working right. Go in the house, notice that the laptop battery is getting a little low, plug in the laptop power supply, and boom, everything's stops working, because I've glitched the data line, if not blown it up. And that's how you learn that the hard way if you don't have common grounds on everything. It does improve the data integrity, and it helps protect your cables and ports from damage. Because what can happen is, these cables they're designed for data, and even though they may have a thicker ground cable, they're not designed to sync the voltage difference, the current across two power supplies. So you end up with your USB cables getting hot or something, if you don't do this correctly. Okay. Um, that said, in all the USB research I did find this one device that is a USB isolator, and this one there's a bunch of them for USB too, and there's a whole confusing thing about super speed, and none of it sounds like what it actually is, but for USB 3, this is the only one I found that does what it says it's going to do, and it does create a ground isolation between your laptop and all of the other nonsense. So I've tested it here at the house, and it works, and there's no problems with using it. I have not religiously used it in the field to really, you know, give it the acid test, I guess. But if you're going to try to protect your laptop USB port electrically, this is the way to go, as far as I can tell. Okay. All right, and then for mechanical, remember we talked about if you trip on your cable and pull your laptop off, there's a company called Tether Tools, and tethering is the term for using your camera, your DSLR in this case, connected to a laptop, basically. That's what tethering means. So this company is called Tether Tools, and they make, extra special USB cables, and they also have this line of products called jerk stoppers. So I've shown here some of the jerk stoppers related to the laptop side. They also have ones. Well, here's one you can use on a camera, a DSLR. So to protect the mechanical port, the USB ports from getting damaged by somebody tripping over a cable. You're still in the laptop. You're still going to pull it off on the floor, but you hopefully won't damage the USB port. So there's that. So we talked about, the way to avoid all this nonsense of long USB cables is to have some type of computer out on the mount. Now, it used to be, everything had to be ASCOM, I talked about, which is a Windows only, but that's no longer the case with Indy and some of the other things that are coming along. So, excuse me, now we have a lot more choices in terms of computers that we can put out on the mount. They don't have to be Windows devices necessarily. They could be as inexpensive as a Raspberry Pi, and they can either be an appliance that you don't have to think about all the software. Maybe it's even as simple as something you drive with your smartphone, and it connects to the mountain focuser and whatnot. But so there's lots of choices, all the way from a Raspberry Pi up to a full-on Windows computer that's purpose built and even designed to be, at a remote imaging location such that you can power cycle USB ports and power cycle these different power ports and whatnot. Since you're not physically there to unplug a USB port and plug it back in, they have a way to do that remotely with powering the USB ports on and off. I happened to settle on this HP Slice thing for mine mount here. Nothing special astronomical about it. It's just I wanted something that could have like an i5 or an i7 CPU in it because I wasn't sure what all I would want to do on that computer. It turns out it's probably way overkill for most things, but anyway, that's what I did. But there's lots of different choices out there. So yeah, you just need to think about, does it need to be Windows or can it be Linux or Raspberry Pi? How much CPU do you need? There's those Intel NUCs and sticks and other things. So do those Atom processors have enough power, CPU power for what you want to do? Um, and one thing, so I still have not personally been to a big star party, uh, but I'm told that at some of them they restrict what you can do with Wi-Fi because they don't want just everybody to go nuts with Wi-Fi and then nobody can do anything. Um, so just something to think about if you're going to do this and you've got a computer that you're dependent on Wi-Fi to control, what happens if you get someplace where they won't let you do Wi-Fi? So that's just something to check with the star party ahead of time. Do they allow Wi-Fi or not? And if not, then what are you going to do about it? So the other thing is Wi-Fi wise, or just networking wise in general, I guess, is there enough bandwidth between where you're going to want to control things and the computer to do what you want to do? So I've just recently started using a 4K monitor in the house, a 50-inch 4K TV actually, and it's means that I can open up all the different, 6 pieces of software that I need. I can have them all open at the same time and see them all at the same time versus flipping through windows and stuff. So that takes a fair amount of bandwidth. Um, Also, at the end of the night or the next day, transferring files and stuff takes a fair amount of bandwidth. So you think about how much bandwidth you want to use. Okay. Image acquisition software. Let's see what we have here. So, I think there was like maybe 3 or 4 choices. I'm sure there's more that were there that I wasn't aware of, but I was aware of maybe 3 or 4 choices back in 2015, right? You had Backyard EOS and Backyard Nikon for your DSLRs. That was the go-to program, but it was limited in terms of automation and things. I think I asked for the option to stop your mount from tracking at the end of a sequence, which he added. So that meant I could, image up to I could start it, go to bed, and it would image up to the meridian and then stop. So that was great for then, but I've moved on to Sequence Generator Pro, which will do an automatic meridian flip and keep going and all that stuff. At the time, Sequence Generator Pro wasn't good with DSLRs. That has since changed, I'm told. I haven't used it with DSLRs, but it's supposed to be good. And besides Sequence Generator Pro, and there's so many more now. There's Nina, and there's Voyager, and there's the SkyX, and so there's lots and lots of choices. There's K-Stars, which has a bunch of names. K-Stars, Ecos, Indie are all kind of the same, open source, all-in-one, planetarium, imaging, plate solving, focusing, auto guiding, all-in-one, runs on a Raspberry Pi, etc., or Windows or other things. Um, and it's free, open source. I said, yeah. So there's that. Uh, Besides the backyard EOS and Nikon, there's astrophotography tool, which is another sort of DSLR focused. It can use some of the mirrorless cameras, which because he's reversed engineered some of that, although they are starting to. There used to be this thing with mirrorless cameras where they didn't offer a software SDK. They were positioning them in the market. Hey, if you want to do stuff if you want to tether, we talked about tethering. If you want to tether, go buy a DSLR because these mirrorless cameras are cheap line or midline, right? Now they're starting to allow some software with that. But before that happened, this guy that does the APT had figured out how to operate some of those mirrorless cameras across a USB cable. Yeah, so there's those, and then ones with lots of automation, sorry. Sequence generator is a real popular one. Nina is easy. It's not really all the way there yet in terms of sequences, because you can't tell it, start at 10:32 and end this target at, midnight and start another one. It's not quite all there yet, but it's got some potential, and it's a lot cleaner interface than Sequence Generator Pro. Voyager, I don't have any experience with. It's supposed to be very good. It doesn't work with my planetarium of choice, which is why I haven't checked it out more deeply. Maybe he'll add support for that at some point. Um, it is supposed to be super bulletproof, so we'll keep an eye on that one. And then there's, kind of the high end, although I don't know, Maxim DL I don't think has been updated in years and years, but the observatories and remote hosting centers that need a lot of automation tend to use Maxim DL and ACP. So if you have a full-on observatory with the dome and all that stuff, then maybe you want to look at that. But SGP can do a lot of that too. Let's see, what else have we got here? We talked about Raspberry Pi, Windows, Mac, Linux. There's free, open source, and commercial. So you just want to think about the level of automation that you need. Do you want something that's all in one? Do you want something that's open source, or do you want something that's commercial? So those are kind of the choices. But at the end of the day, these are the things that you want to do, right? So this particular 5F concept. So you want to find objects. So you need a planetarium program, or maybe your imaging program knows how to find things or go out and get the location of things across the internet or something. So there's that, and that needs to talk to your mount driver, and because it has a model of the mount driver has a model of the sky that helps your mount stay on track. Then you're going to want a plate solve, which is that comes from back in the day. Uh, Photography was not film, but glass plates with emulsion glomped on there. And you put the plate in a telescope and take an image and develop it, and then you have this glass plate with a negative image on it. And to solve the plate was to find out where in the sky that plate was an image of to a high degree of accuracy. So that's what plate solving is. And the reason it's important for us is, one, to help you get on a target, because no matter how good your polar alignment is, how good your mount is, you're going to say, go to M42, and it's going to go there, and then you're going to take a picture and there's no M42 in the frame, and it's like right next to it, but you don't know that. With a visual scope, you'd have a finder scope with a wider field of view, and you could go, oh, it's right there, and I'll just move it a little bit with the handset in the case of a German equatorial mount. But we don't really have that in photography. So, and we have all these computers and stuff to help us. So we do plate solving. So what happens is you tell your mount to go to M42, it goes to M42, and you start plate solving, take a picture. It says, oh, your mount said you were pointed at M42, but I just figured out you really pointed, 100 arc minutes off to the side. So then it sends a correction go to the mount, and it does that in a loop until you're dead on with your imaging target in the center of your field of view. So that's what plate solving is. And when that it's fiddly to get working, or at least it was with some of the older programs. Man, when I got that working, that just totally changed the hobby for me. I mean, because I was not a visual observer. I don't know how to star hop. Didn't know how to find stuff in the sky. And when I could just say, hey, go to M42, and then it just boom, it's there. That just was huge. So you need plate solving. Okay, and then to follow objects, you need the auto guider to improve on your mount performance. And to focus on objects, you'd like to have autofocusing, and you'd like to control your filters. And then, of course, you need to put all that together into sequences of exposures and filters. So these are the things that you want to think about in, does the software take care of all of that, or do you need individual pieces to do those functions? Okay, we're making good progress here. So speaking of software, what I'll be using tonight is I have chosen to use Stellarium planetarium software. It's a free open source program, and it's photorealistic. You can have images of deep space objects in there. You can you can go out to your telescope observing location and take a picture with your smartphones, a panorama, and then put it in the planetarium and line things up so when things are going to be behind the house, behind a tree, whatever. I find that really valuable when I'm planning and also when I'm imaging. I have Orion HDX 110, so I'll be using EQMOD as my mount driver. Free, it's closed source, but it's free software. I will be auto guiding with PhD2. That's free software available on multiple platforms now. I'm using the ONAG, so I'll be using some software called Focus Lock to do the focusing. I'll be using Sequence Generator Pro, which does kind of everything else. I guess we could do some live stacking. That's not a normal part of imaging. I'm normally doing long exposures and not looking at them so much, but we can take shorter exposures and use some software to quickly build up a color image, even though I'm using a mono camera with filters. And so there's searched long and hard for this because it seemed like it should be there, but nobody seemed to have that capability. But there's some program called Astro Toaster, which is free, which uses Deep Sky Stacker underneath the covers to put together a color image from either narrowband or RGB filters. So we can fire that up after we get everything else going. So that's the software we're going to be using here. And hopefully the weather is holding. we'll check on that in a minute. Okay. So another thing that has changed, speaking of Stellarium. So back in the day, Stellarium by itself did not know how to talk to ASCOM mounts. It knew how to talk to a few mounts with the serial cable, but not ASCOM mounts. So there was this little piece of shim software that some guy in England wrote. Welsh Dragon Computing wrote Stellarium Scope, so you had to have that little piece of software. Now, with the last couple versions of Stellarium, they do have an ASCOM driver built in, so you can forego the Stellarium scope. And you can see here in Stellarium, you can see my observing location landscape in there. Okay, I guess there's one more thing to talk about before we get into the demo. Planning resources. So one of my videos in 2015 was, about books and online stuff and for how do you astroplan. So a couple updates there. I think the best planning software I have found to date is something called Sky Tools for Imaging, a company called Skyhound. And I'm not going to go any deeper into it than just, saying you can check it out. But it's going to show you so much stuff. What nights of the year are best for your target. When is it up and up above your horizon, and where is it relative to the moon, and how long should you expose for, and how big is it, and on and on and on and on. So it's just got a ton of stuff. I'm still learning all the stuff that's in there. So there's that. And then with that, I also kind of sanity check everything. I look in AstroBin, which we'll talk about in a minute. I look on Wikipedia. What are those deep space objects look like? What have other people done? And then I, sanity check in Stellarium. Where are they? What is my FOV the right size for the object? And when is it going to be behind a tree and all that stuff. So those are the updated planning tools that I've used since making those videos. There are many online resources, so I didn't take the time to list them here. Cal Sky is one that comes to mind. Worldwide Telescope. I think there's Telescopius or something I get email from that suggests targets for my location. There's a everybody probably has their favorite, but there's lots of them. So you can just Google for that stuff. But in terms of paid software, this is by far the most advanced. Is the Sky Tools for Imaging. Okay, speaking of AstroBin, if you don't know about AstroBin, I kind of cringe when I say it's sort of like social media for astrophotographers because I'm not a big social media person, but it's where most people post their astro photos. And yes, you can like them and comment on them and whatnot. But what's really powerful for me as a planning resource is you can search for not just objects, like you could, well, what have people done? So I've seen a million M42s. Has anybody done one that's really different? Oh, look at that. So you can search for objects. That's cool. And, you could even search for, hey, my FOV is this big. Show me the objects that'll fit in my field of view, right? So you can do that kind of search. But you can also search for gear because people are supposed to anyway. When you post there, you're supposed to say what gear you use. So you could say, well, I'm thinking about buying a 12-inch truss RC, and I'm going to use an ASI 1600 with that. So what can I do with that? What have people done with that? So you can search for gear and then see what people have done with the gear before you buy it. So I think that's pretty powerful. So AstroBin is a great resource. It's also just a great place to browse around and see all the amazing stuff that's up in the sky. So on the right here is my page as it looks right at the moment. Um, and here's one of the search inputs over here. So there's you can put up to 10 images, I think, for free, and then beyond that, there's a charge, and it's nominal. It's all good. Okay. So, getting close to the demo. So, what has changed in my rigs since 2015? So, this is what we're going to be using tonight. I call it semi-permanent. I don't have there's still a tripod here that could be moved. I have moved this scope other than changing houses. I have moved this scope once to a remote site, and I won't do that again because we're talking about 250 pounds of mount and counterweights and stuff just for the mount. But so it's not on a pier, so I call it semi-permanent. So it's there, it's out there set up all the time. I have a cover for it. It's right down here on the tripod is the computer. And then I sit in my office slash studio slash control room slash workshop and control it from the comfort of my house. And I do that via Wi-Fi. We dive in a little deeper. Let's look at what I call the instrument package. So, so that's a 12-inch truss RC, and I keep saying RC. So RC is the Ritchie Crichton optical design. Two guys back in the day designed this particular optical setup. It's the same optical setup that the Hubble uses, and pretty much every big telescope after Palomar, uses an RC design. It may be made up of segmented mirrors versus just a single primary, but it's still, the shape of the mirrors and the optical configuration is what makes it an RC. Okay, so I have a 12-inch RC. That means it's got a 12-inch primary mirror, and it's a truss RC, which means that it's, if we go back one here, you can see the truss pieces of carbon fiber truss here, and there's more underneath this shroud. It would normally, without the shroud, you could look right through it here. So it's just to make it light and stiff and strong is the carbon fiber truss design. So what do we have here? So I mentioned one of the projects I did in the last year was to do a home built rotator. So that's what this belt is right here. And we'll talk about that a little just in a second here, I guess. And then there's a Moonlight focuser here with its stepper motor to control the focus. And then we have the electronics for the rotator, which I've since moved off onto the telescope because it kept getting in the way when I needed to take things on and off the scope here. Mostly inside the focuser and just sticking out the rear end of the focuser is my focal reducer. And then we have an adapter and the onag, that's that thing with the mirror in it, right? So the visible light comes through the telescope and bounces off the mirror, the cold mirror, goes through the filter wheel into the imaging camera. Okay, and then the infrared light continues past the mirror to the guide camera here. So that's how that all works. And we just have another view of the other side of things here so you can see a little better. There's the filter wheel in the imaging camera. Okay. Yeah, so the way the rotator works, so the Moonlight focuser has the ability to manually rotate, and the mechanics of that are so good that it can be automated and everything stays collimated and aligned so that you have good imaging even after you've rotated. And in fact, they sell a rotating kit to upgrade their focusers to be rotating, and they also sell bigger, badder focusers that are have built-in rotators. But I decided I wanted to build one on my own, so I did a lot of 3D printed parts, and with help of good buddy Paulo, a club member, introduced me to Arduinos and did a circuit. Uh, so we've got that in there, and so here's the stepper motor, 3D printed mount to the focuser, and in this one you can see a gear on the stepper motor, and then there's a 3D printed gear that friction fits on the actual back end of the telescope. And then in this picture, you can see the belt that connects these two gears. And so, the gear on the telescope is stationary, and you turn the focuser, the rotator stepper motor, and the whole focuser then rotates around the telescope on this belt. That's how that works. Okay. Yeah, so I also have a refractor, and I've arranged it so I can take that same instrument package basically from here back from the 12-inch RC and bring it all up and put it on the back end with some spacers of the refractor, and so I can get a wider field of view with the same capabilities, not the rotator, but I guess I could, but I haven't done that. But focusing and focal reduction and the onag and all that stuff. And then also I can use that refractor with some other bits and pieces to make it into a solar rig. So you'll see this dove plate on the top of the RC, and you'll see counterweights in pictures in different positions, and that's because I need to adjust them differently depending on what I have or don't have on this dovetail here. Okay, it's time for the demo. Let's see. Don't have any questions. Maybe I'll pause just for a second here and see if anybody has any questions they want to put in the chat before we dive into the demo. Trying to account for the 10-second delay for YouTube. Finish my coffee here. All right, I'll keep an eye on that. So let's get out a PowerPoint here. So now we're looking at my telescope computer, and I was just going to adjust, there we go, the landscape brush just so you can see what's going on here. Okay. So my scope is in this long yard between two homes here. And so here's Polaris, and this is where my scope is pointing in the home position. And here's, we can rotate around wherever. This is the planetarium program, Stellarium. We can rotate around and look at the sky. So we have that, and let's see, we have a couple other things that let us know what's going on. we have, oh, not on that computer, on this computer, we have, I have an all-sky camera, and the project that I did this week was I found this really great open source software that makes it runs the all sky camera, does the auto exposure. um, it puts this overlay on it, and I've got it pretty close. If you look at these two stars here, I've sort of got it pretty close, and you'll see when we look at the star trails here and stuff, you can see that Polaris is in the right place. So it does that, and it also does some fun stuff. There's time lapses every night, and then it does this thing where it takes one row of pixels, or column, I should say, and it just makes a all-night picture of what happened in that one column of pixels. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with the weather. And then there's this fun star trails view too. So look at all those. So first of all, there's some clouds, and there's some star trails, and you can see that it's rotating around Polaris here. And then you can see all these planes because I'm in the pattern for Oakland Airport. Um, so fortunately, that generally doesn't cause any problems for me. But the night after that, it was cloudy all night. So anyway, just really nice, and it was easy to set up all sky camera. So that just helps me understand, do I have clouds? Do I have fog? And I can go back. There's an archive of these images, so I can go back and see what happened at 2 a.m. It got foggy. And then the other thing is I did a homebrew cloud sensor. So this cloud sensors are just infrared, uh, pointing at the sky, infrared sensors. So there's the ambient temperature here in blue, and the sky temperature in green here. And you want them to be, uh, you know, 15 or 20 degrees apart. Ideally, the sky temperature would be like minus 10 degrees, and I think just because I'm parked right now, hopefully that'll drop. But uh, the open sky should be about minus 10 degrees, and then if you've got a cloud, it'll jump up in temperature. Interestingly enough, fog doesn't do that. Fog is the same temperature as the open sky, and detecting fog is a whole nother thing, involving lasers and backscatter and stuff. So that's a project yet to be taken on. But between this and the all sky camera, then we're going to know what's going on. One more thing, we've got a ring camera. So I can see what's going on with the telescope. So we'll fire that up in a second here. So for instance, I've already got everything connected. Let's just slew the scope just for grins here, and let's double check and see if wrong computer, see if the mount is parked. Mount is not parked. Okay, so if I want to go to, say, M92, so it just centered the planetarium on M92, and then I can do Control 1, and the scope is going to move to M92. So if I go back to this other computer and look at ring, there's the telescope moving to M92, and there's my dog going in the house. So there's that. M92 is right next to the meridian. That's why the scope is pointing straight up. Okay, so let's get serious about doing some imaging here. So this is the planetarium program, and we've used it to move the scope to a target, although our imaging software could have done that as well. But we're just going to kind of do some things a little manually here to start us out with. So, as I mentioned, the planetarium program now has its own ASCOM driver. So when you start Stellarium, it's going to start our mount driver. And that's what that looks like. And I've unparked it. And then the next piece of software that we're going to use is PhD2, which is the free auto guiding software. And PhD2 stands for Push Here Dummy, because all you're supposed to need to do is click these buttons in a row down here. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the idea. So you start here and you connect your equipment. So all of these equipment choosers here, I'll just disconnect what I want to. I can disconnect the rotator here for a minute. So these equipment choosers, ASCOM equipment choosers, work the same in all the software, right? So you have a choice of different things to pick from. You know, I want to use this driver here, and then there's settings. That you can set for that are relative to that device, and then you say, okay, I want to connect. Okay, and that's how all those things work. So, okay, we're connected, so we can close that. And then if you wanted to proceed down the row here, you can start looping the camera, taking exposures. This is the guiding camera, remember. Okay, so there's M92 off in the corner, and we've got some funny looking stars because we're not focused with the astigmatism. And so if we were going to keep going at this point, we would, actually we can do that because we're going to use this to focus. So you're going to pick a good star with this star magnifying glass, and assuming you're already calibrated, then you just click the next one, and bingo, you're auto guiding now. So the mount, if we show this here, so the mount, see here it says, hopefully you can read the small font, track rate sidereal plus PEC. So it's tracking at the rate of the stars in the right ascension, and it's also got the periodic error correction curve, which I recorded at another time running. So we're tracking with the mount, and then this software is then going to send corrections to speed up or slow down the mount in right ascension and move the mount in deck as needed to keep it more accurately tracking the stars. And you can see this star is nowhere near round. And when I start the autofocus software, it will become more round, but it won't ever get to a pure round ball, which has to do with that I have an RC with a large center obstruction and the size of my pixels and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter. Okay, so if we're, let's see, did I start? I did not start Focus Lock. So Focus Lock is the software that works with the ONAG and an image from PhD2 to adjust the focuser. So we're going to connect it to all the gear. And so this image right here is the same image that we saw of the star, selected star in PhD2. And what it's going to do now, you can see here, this is the focuser in SGP, and we'll go through all the SGP stuff, but you can see here the position of the focuser is changing. So we're already, we're using that real-time focus control to get us in focus while we're guiding here. So we'll just let that run until it turns green. Okay, let's see. So the next thing is Sequence Generator Pro. So let's talk about that. This thing is kind of a beast. There's a lot of moving parts, and that's why some people might prefer something like Nina. But when it comes right down to, if you want to do the full automation, then you kind of need all these bits and pieces. You can change this layout. So all these things around the edges here are widgets that you can pick which ones you want and paste them where you want. Excuse me. So these are the ones that I find helpful. And it's got two other main windows that you need to know about here. So one is the control panel. So for each of the major devices, the camera, filters, focus, the mount, plate solving, auto guiding, and then there's everything else. In my case, the rotator and a flat box. There's a tab in the control panel for each of those things with a ton of settings for, how are you going to do your when are you going to do your autofocus? When are you going to do your autofocus? What are all the settings? And there may be even layers of menus for some of these things. So that's the control panel. And then the other major window is the actual sequencer. So this is where you have, a sequence is a list of targets. So I probably have way too many targets in a sequence, but I tend to reuse a sequence for a long time. So a list of targets, and then each target, you're going to have different events, which are lights and maybe darks and flats, and those are going to have different filters, and they're going to have an exposure length, and they're going to have a bin setting, and how many of them do you want? And so this is where you set up all that. It's also where you connect your gear, which is a little strange, but this is where they put it. So again, this is just like if we want to do that rotator thing again, right? So if I disconnect the rotator, then I can select, well, which rotator that I have drivers for do I want to use? I want to use that one. I could click this to bring up that control panel for that driver, or the settings, I should say, for that driver. And then when I want to connect to it, I can just connect. So that's how that works. So we have the main group here is your camera, your filter wheel, your focuser, your mount driver, and then these ones that are hidden here, flat box, rotator, if you had a dome, if you had a safety device, if you had weather sensors, that other stuff is down here. Okay. So yeah, before we started, so I connected all those things. Let's see where we are. We're in focus now. It's just in and out of focus, I guess. So let's look at what we want to go and image. I think I should have kept an eye on M92 if it went across the meridian while we were talking here. Can I see Stellarium? I told you I would just switch to using a 4K monitor. So in order for you guys to see all this stuff, I wanted to do it back on 1080p again, but it means that it's all jumping off the edge of the screen here. Let's see if I can get it to come back. This is one of the things that is wonky with Windows. Okay, we still haven't crossed the meridian, but we're going to cross it pretty soon. So we should probably jump on this before it gets too far past there. So let's look at what I had set up here for M92. I was doing this for one of the armchair star parties. So I was just taking short 60-second exposures in red, green, and blue. I would normally do 2-minute or maybe even 5-minute exposures with red, green, and blue filters if I wanted, RGB stars, or I was taking a galaxy or something. But for purposes of live stacking, I was just taking shorter exposures. And because the exposures were short, I asked for just a whole bunch of them. So it basically just goes forever. And then we have rotate through the events. So rather than finish a row and then go to the next one, it'll rotate through the filters. So that's what's set up there. I think we could just say run sequence and magically everything should just work, right? Okay, so it's checking the auto guider status. It's going to stop guiding. See here, it stopped guiding. There's no longer a green cross there. Then it's going to slew to the target, which we were already there, but it's got a check. Okay, and then it's going to capture a frame and plate solve it. So I've got a 20-second plate solving frame programmed in here. And I just started using a new plate solver, new to me plate solver anyway, and I'm going to forget the acronym. It's like ATSP or something like that instead of plate solve 2. And you saw it just happened in the blink of an eye there. It's so fast. Plate solve 2 was the previous best in class. And that one has like a 10-second delay built in. So even if it solves almost instantaneously, you still have to wait at least 10 seconds. You can see here M92 is off to the side, so our go-to wasn't perfect. And now it's going to be in the center, and so the plate solve happened already, and it's moving on, so it's resuming the auto guider. So we can just go peek at that to make sure it does its thing. So it picked a star. So I'm not touching anything, right? This is Sequence Generator Pro running PhD2. Okay, so now it's restarted the auto guider, so I can clear out this old data here. Okay, and it's waiting for the auto guider to settle, which it has done. And so now it's set the filter for the first event, which was the red filter here. You can see the red filter here. And now we're imaging. So it's taking a 60-second exposure of M92 with a mono camera. So it'll look like this with a red filter. So that's the short version of that. We can do some live stacking here as well. Why don't we just wait just a second here for this to finish so you can see. Oh, and okay, so it's downloading that image it just took. There's the image it just took. Setting filter to green. Now it's taking the green exposure. So this down here tells us we're 10 minutes away from a meridian flip. Okay, so that'll happen on its own. A meridian flip is a complicated sequence of stuff that has to happen if you think about it. And this software does it all for you, so it could happen while you were sleeping and could happen multiple times as you jump between targets and all of that while you're not at your scope. So just off the top of my head, it has to stop the auto guider. Well, first it has to stop imaging, then it's going to stop the auto guider, tell the mount to slew to the target, and since the mount knows that the target is now past the meridian, it's going to go back around through Polaris and come back at the target from the other side of the pier, which is the meridian flip, essentially. Then, again, you've done a go-to on a mount that's not 100% perfectly polar aligned and level and super accurate, so you need to plate solve again. So we go through that plate solving process to get the target back in the center of your field of view. Then you need to restart the auto guider, pick a guide star, get guiding, get settled, and then start imaging again. So Sequence Generator Pro and other programs that are fully automation do all of that for you. And if something goes wrong, then they have a plan to recover, etc. Okay, so that'll happen as we talk here. And now, oh, actually, it's only a minute and 25 seconds away. So maybe we'll just, oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong timer. It's still 8 minutes away. All right, now we're doing a blue filter. So while that's waiting for the auto meridian flip to happen, let's do this. I have all my Astro stuff in a folder. Let's do Astro Toaster. Again, free software. I looked long and hard for this. Start a new session. Select new folder. Looks like I was actually doing M92 for the Armchair Star Party last time I ran this, but we'll just do it again. M92 lights. Okay. Save folder changes. So what this is doing, if I can get this moved, we want to monitor, we want to stack, we want to auto refresh, and at some point we're going to want to color adjust too. So what this is doing, and the reason you can already see an image is because it's looking at images that were already taken of this target. You can see there's a little progress bar here, and it's red because it's redoing everything basically. But here's a list of all the images that were previously in that folder. And it's using, in the background, it's using Deep Sky Stacker to stack all the red images and create a red stacked image, and all the green images and create a green stacked image, and all the blue images, where's that, down here, create a blue stacked image, and then there's a merge image where then it merges the red, green, and blue with the appropriate color treatment, and there's your M92 live stacked. Not too shabby for 60-second exposures. And you can do flat fields and other things, which I didn't bother. So there's some vignetting and light pollution and stuff and gradients, what have you. But anyway, just for the purposes of the online armchair star party, this was the quickest way to get a color image, right? Because nobody wants to look at the monochrome image that shows in SGP isn't very exciting, um, and people want to see color. Um, and I didn't, I got rid of my color cameras, so that was kind of the only choice for me. And it's really cool that it also works for narrowband, right? So you'd be doing H alpha, sulfur 2, oxygen 3, and then you could assign in the Astro Toaster program, you could assign red, green, and blue to those filter colors, and then it would give you, a color rosette or M42 or what have you. I guess M42 is not really narrowband, but you get the idea. Um, pick your narrowband target. We're actually, let's see, we're still catching up. I could have started it from scratch, but basically, you get after only three 60-minute frames, right? You could have a color image, and it would be a little not so detailed. And over time, as you add more images to it, it'll get sharper and sharper as it goes along. So that's how live stacking works. Okay. Let's just take a peek at. See, our guiding looks pretty good. This is near the meridian, so that our guiding should be really good there. And yes, I am zoomed out. When normally I would be like this, which looks a little messier, but that's what I care about, right? When I'm really serious about imaging, I'm going to be looking at things at this scale, where this is plus minus 2 arc seconds, so I really want to be inside here. And here's another way to view that. This is a 2 arc second circle, and ideally I would stay inside the 1 arc second circle here. So I would, try to adjust things and whatnot, um, to try to improve my guiding and keep everything closer in. But for the armchair star party purposes, it was better just to have a relaxed view of things. And of course, you can control the dimensions and stuff here as well. Uh, okay. Any questions again? I will pause for a moment here and see if anybody wants to type in any questions. I think we're going to let it do a meridian flip here, and we're still a minute and a half away from the meridian flip. And maybe we'll, after that, we can go and look at another target, I guess. The target I'm working on right now is not the bubble nebula, but the soap bubble nebula, which is a little more challenging. It's, oh, let's see. We're doing the meridian flip. Okay. So I'm normally asleep at this point, right? But we'll, depends, of course, what target you're talking about. But so I'm just gonna let it do it on its own just to prove. So I won't go ahead and save the 30 seconds here. So I was talking about the soap bubble Nebula. So it is near, I think it's near the Crescent Nebula, if I recall correctly, right next to the Crescent Nebula. And it's just this perfectly round soap. It looks like a soap bubble. And it's pretty dim. So I've been collecting. I've got about 10 hours per filter. So now we're doing the auto meridian flip, right? So it turned the guider off. It slewed the scope. I guess we're waiting for the scope to slew. If I'm really quick here, I could get my ring camera up again so we can see the scope slewing. Live view. There's the scope moving. Oh, how exciting. You can see all the security lights going on and off. The scope is moving. Okay, so it's going to come and point straight up again because it's at the meridian, but from the other side of the pier. Okay. So now we're going to plate solve to see if we're on target or not. Let me move this out of the way. And we got multiple dialogues. I guess I can't move that one. Like I said, I'm usually asleep for this part. Okay, so it's taking a 20-second exposure for plate solving. If you blink, you're going to miss the plate solve. And it's done. Okay, and it says failed because we're not within 50 pixels of where we want to be, so it'll repeat the process. And you can see M92 is off over here this time. So we're still pulling it into the center. May take 2 or 3 cycles here. But again, this new to me plate solver is so fast. Takes, the 20-second exposure is by far the longest part of the process now. Huh, it actually says it's solving. Well, I talked it up too much, huh? I did see a post on Cloudy Nights, or not Cloudy Nights, on the main sequence site that said that there might be a bug with this particular solver and SGP interacting. If it doesn't solve quickly, that it doesn't fail over properly to the blind plate solver. A blind plate solver means that you don't have any hints about where in the sky you think you're pointing. And the way that SGP works is you can configure 2 different plate solvers. The one that's super fast that works with hints, and then if that fails for some reason, then you can fail over to a slower one that's more robust in terms of not having to be, you don't have to give it any hints with where it is, but it then has to look through the entire sky. So it can take up to like 10 minutes. So I'm surprised, and I can't move this dialog out of the way, but I bet M92 is right underneath there in the center. The trials and tribulations of a live demo, huh? So I could abort this and figure out what's going on, but that would kind of spoil the automation thing. And I did do what you're not supposed to do before a live demo, which was, change something. I changed, and I did let it run for a couple nights first, but I did change the plate solving software. So maybe there's more work to be done here. I kind of hate to, let's see, can I turn off? No, I can't even do this while it's running. If I abort this, then Sequence Generator Pro is going to do a whole bunch of stuff to try to recover, and I'm going to be like fighting it if I get involved here, but I guess that's kind of what I need to do at this point. All right, bite the bullet. Abort. Yes. Okay, so you can see it's right there in the center. Let's just try to resume here and see. Well, first of all, hopefully we didn't run all the end of sequence stuff. Yeah, not tracking. It did run the end of sequence stuff. All right. Let's see. So we want to get the scope moving again. So we want to center on target M92. Sidereal and pec. So we are tracking now, and I bet this guy got disconnected from everything. So connect all that. Close. Start looping. Oh, that's interesting. Never seen that before. This is the new plate solver, ASTAP. All right, well, I am not going to try to troubleshoot this now. I do want to try to collect some data before the fog comes in on my target, so we'll try to move over to that before we call it quits here for the evening. What did I want to do? I want to look at don't see any fog coming in. Yeah, see, when I moved out of the home position, this is the real sky temperature, -10, so that's no clouds. So that's good, no clouds, no fog. So I'm going to try to take advantage of this time. What's it doing? Is it still just stuck solving? Solving. All right, so we're done. We're going to be done with M92. And I bet it shut everything down again. No, this time it didn't. It's still tracking. All right, so switch to, this is my soap bubble, PNJU1. It's recently, I think 2018 discovered object, even though it's close to the Crescent Nebula. And I've stopped, as of last night, I stopped collecting H alpha data. See, I'm taking 10-minute exposures, HA, S2, O3. I've got enough H alpha. My rule of thumb, I'm here in a white zone, right? Light pollution in the middle of a city. Light pollution is horrible. The way you overcome that is by taking lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of data. So what might take you 45 minutes at Little Uvis takes 10 hours literally per filter here. So I've got a little over 10 hours. I got 11 hours of HA data already, and so I'm just collecting some more because these are the S2 and the O3 are noisier than the HA. So I want to just get a little bit more data, S2 and O3, before I process that. So that's the plan. So let's just see if we can just. So one of the things I learned recently about this, if you don't want to fight that auto recovery stuff, you can turn it off by clicking down here where it says recovery. The only problem with that is I always forget then to turn it back on because I want it on when I'm not trying to manually operate things. Let's just leave it on. Okay, so the camera cooler got turned off in that whole process, so we're gonna tell it to start the sequence after the camera becomes cool. And so we're gonna set it to minus 20 degrees in 5 minutes. Oh, actually it just started cooling on its own, okay. And we're slewing to the target. We can see that happening in, if I can get Stellarium to show again. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Okay. Yep, got 2 copies of Stellarium running, sorry. This guy. Windows. Come on. Here. Restore. Let's get rid of this one. Damn it. Sorry, excuse me. There it goes. Okay. So where's the scope? Should be right around in here somewhere. We can tell the planetarium to go to PNJU1. So it actually went out to, this is not an object that it knows about, but it went out to the Simbad server and found it. So there it is. And if we zoom in a little bit, we see that the telescope is pointing near there anyway. So that's good. Let's see what's going on. Sequence aborted, guide star lost. Oh, and all this got disconnected again, so we need to connect all this stuff. Close, loop. That looks like we're not tracking again. Not tracking. Jeez. Okay, sidereal and PEC, so we're going to need to sequence aborted, guide star lost. So let me just help this guy along here. Center on target. See if this plate solve works now. It's been working all week on this target, so. Oh, let's see if we can see anything here. Do you see a soap bubble there? I think it's pretty much there. We're pretty close. You won't see it until we do an HA, but I think we're pretty much there. Okay, here comes the plate solve. And solving, and it worked. And we were right on target. We were only 22 pixels away in one direction and 26 in the other. Okay, so now if I say resume sequence, everything should be just hunky-dory. We're still not to temperature yet, so we'll delay start. Oh, and now it's going to go and do the same thing all over again. Because I did it manually, so now it's got to check. Solving, done. Resuming the auto guider. Let's see if it picks a good star. I don't like that star, but it's too late to change it. It's my signal to noise ratio. That's just really low. Ugh, I wish you could just say go to there. Because what's going to, oh, I know what I'll do. Here, let's do this. Can I turn this off now? Yeah, okay. Turning off all the safety features. Now let's see if I do this quickly. There, pick, no. Okay, whatever. Let's see if I can get it to pick a better star this time. And sequence generator disconnected everything, even though I turned off the safety features. I should have just ended the demo with M92, huh? Yep, and we're not tracking. Sidereal. Now we're off target. Let's pick a bright star. Maybe it will remember that, huh? All right, let's try this again. See, I'm fighting against sequence generator, all its safety stuff, even though I turned it off. And this is one of the reasons why I think people look for a better or different solution. But I have yet to find one that is as good as Sequence Generator Pro that uses the components I want to use. Apparently there's no way around this. Oh, here we go. One more time. Down to 3 viewers. One of which is probably me, huh? That's okay. Yeah, so basically I'm just going to get it going again. I guess I could show you this image that I'm working on. Let's see where we are here. Resuming the auto guider. Please pick a good star. Maybe I can pick one for you. Yes. What happened? Was I fast enough? Yes, I was fast enough. See, we had a much brighter star. We have crazy high signal to noise with the ONAG 500 dB, over 500 dB. But that's one of the issues, is there's still some fine tuning that needs to be done with the PhD2 star selection in the case of an ONAG, I think, is why we're still having some issues there. But most of the time it works fine on its own. Okay, waiting on camera temperature. All right, so before I forget, we're going to turn the recovery back on because we've done all the steps that we need to do. So it'll just start when the camera cools off. While we're waiting for that, let me open Photoshop. So I'm in kind of a weird place. So I've done pretty much processed the HA as far as I'm going to process it, and then I did the RGB stars. So it's kind of weird. It's a monochrome image with RGB stars, but that's where I am. But I just want you to see what this soap bubble thing looks like. Or I could show you on Astrobin, I guess. But almost there. I think it's that one. Yep. All right, let me drag this over onto the screen so you can see it, maybe. Come on. View, fit on screen. So like I said, it's kind of weird that we've got these RGB stars layered in over the top of the H alpha with a star mask. But anyway, there's the soap bubble. Yeah, let me show you a finished one that somebody else did, which is how I became aware of it. So if we go to Astrobin, soap bubble. And yes, we didn't look at NeoEyes because NeoEyes would have been behind trees for me here. Oh, come on, it's not that close, is it? Really? Get this out of the way. Oh, he drew a circle and says it's in there. Oh, I do see it in the image. It's pretty small. Let me get you a narrowband image here. Oops. Where's where's the image I was looking at? Oh, come on. It was just in the last few days. Or well, no, because it's been more than that, because it's been everybody's got the Crescent Nebula in there. I want a close up. Oh well. Oh, there it is. Ah, there you go. I think that's a different crop. He did a different one. Anyway, well, yeah, I guess we could zoom in, huh? So this is the target that I'm working on right now. Isn't that cool? Just a bubble out in space. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So we are capturing, sorry about these menus. So we're capturing event 2, which would be sulfur 2, the 85th frame, 85th 10-minute frame. All right, so I'm going to let that run the rest of the night. We do expect to have some clouds and fog coming in, but no rain, so I'm going to let it run. And sequence generator will take care of things when it stops being able to guide. It'll stop tracking and disconnect things, warm up the camera, which is how I'll find it then in the morning when I get up. So that's all good. So that's it for the live demo. Still don't have anything in the chat. So one more time, I'll pause here for questions if you want to type a question in to the chat. Or we can call it a night. Let me pull up the PowerPoint. And where'd my camera go? There it is. Okay, looking at the wrong screen. Okay, let me look at the chat window here. Crickets. Okay, well, again, hopefully, if you were watching videos from 2015, then that weren't covered in the 2015 videos. And this event was recorded, and it will be at the same URL that you used tonight. It will be available on the SJAA channel, YouTube channel immediately, and I will also tomorrow take a copy of it and put it up on my channel. So either place you go, you will get to see this going forward. So there's the QR codes for the YouTube channels, mine and SJAA's, and you can find some more information about the imaging programs by me and Bruce, whose picture you see there. Bruce is at a star party tonight in a likely place, California. It was to be the Stellarview Star Party, which was canceled due to COVID, but people could voluntarily, with social distancing, go and have a unofficial star party. So that's what he chose to do. So he's up there, and he does the imaging SIG programs, and I do the hands-on imaging. So you can read about both those programs, as well as see a slideshow of images that club members have taken on that on this link here in this QR code. And then, of course, all our publicly facing events are announced on Meetup, SJ-Astronomy, link and QR code. And the club private events, we have mailing lists or Google groups. They're all Google groups now. One for astroimaging and one for observers, visual observers, where the club private ones are announced. And again, for only $20 a year, you can join the club. So Wolf, our solar guy, says, for the price of a pizza, you can join SJAA and take advantage of all the programs and loaner program and a lot of good stuff. So consider doing that. You can go to sjaa.net and look for the membership link. And I'm sure I had a link somewhere earlier in the presentation part of tonight with the QR code. But anyway, you can find it at sjaa.net. Okay. I think that we're going to call it a night here. Don't have any questions in the chat, so we will call it a night at this point. And one last time, this program will be available, both my channel and SJAA. You can see it on the SJAA at the same link that you used tonight if you want to go back and look at it again for reference. So thanks for attending, and good night, and we'll look forward to another program next month or the following month. I have to look and see where in the quarter we are. All right. Thank you so much. Good night.